We are on page 86 in Kitzur Shluchan Aruch Chapter 18, section 16. As explained in chapter 12, law 3, a person who feels even the slightest need to use a toilet may not pray until he relieves himself. In particular, this applies to the Shmoneh Esrei. A person may not stand in preparation for the Shmoneh Esrei if he feels any need until he relieves himself. Even if you can wait until after, don't wait. However, if at the outset he felt no need, and then in the midst of the Shmoneh Esrei felt the need to urinate or defecate, he should try to contain himself until he completes the Shmoneh Esrei and not interrupt the Shmoneh Esrei prayers. Rather, he should hold himself back and not leave to relieve himself in the midst of his prayer until he completes the blessings Amevarech et Amo Yisrael Bashalom. So we have to check ourselves, but once we start the prayer, we shouldn't stop to go to the bathroom. We're not allowed to make any interruption during the Shmoneh Esrei. Number 17. The following rules apply when a person feels that he is about to release gas and is unable to contain himself. If he is praying at home, he should step back 4 cubits or step to the side, release the gas, wait until the odor ceases, return to his place, and say the following prayer. Master of the world, you have created us with numerous orifices and cavities. It is revealed and known before you our shame and embarrassment, during our lives, worms and maggots in our deaths. He should then complete his prayers. I did not see anybody say that prayer, and we just, you got to do what you got to do. You move away from where you pray. If he released gas against his will while standing in his place, or if he was praying together with the congregation and it would be embarrassing for him to move back, he does not have to leave his place. Similarly, he should not say the prayer, Master of the world, the one said above. Rather, he should wait until the odor ceases and then complete his prayer. So while there is an odor, we are forbidden from prayer. Number 18. Right now we have a sewer problem. If the odor would come into the synagogue, it is forbidden to pray. So right now in the parking lot, it is forbidden to make a prayer. Number 18. It is forbidden to sit within 4 cubits of a person who is reciting the Shmoneh Esrei. This applies regardless of whether one is sitting in front of him, behind them, or to the side. If the person sitting is also involved in matter relevant to prayer, he may remain sitting. Other opinions show even greater leniency and do not require a person to move even if he is not involved in prayer, as long as he is studying Torah out loud. So if somebody is praying and he is in front of me, I have to move myself 4 cubits, because when the person prays, God, divine presence, is resting upon him, and therefore the 4 cubits in front of him are holy and they have to be removed. However, the opinions are that if I am praying too, I can stay there, or if I study Torah aloud, according to the second opinion. A person who fears the word of God should not sit in front of a person reciting Shmoneh Esrei, if the latter can see him. This applies even if one is reciting the Shema. Nevertheless, there is no objection if one sits to the side or the back of the person praying. One may stand near him in any direction, even in front of him. But to sit, it is unacceptable. What? To stand is okay. Yeah. Number 19. If a person who is weak remains sitting near a colleague reciting the Shmoneh Esrei, one should not rebuke him. Don't rebuke someone if you know that he does it not out of disrespect, but just because the person is weak. Number 20. If the person sitting near a colleague reciting the Shmoneh Esrei had been sitting previously, and his colleague rose to recite the Shmoneh Esrei at his side or in front of him, he is not required to get up, since that colleague has entered his domain and he was in that area first. Right? Makes sense? However, if the person praying stood up to recite the Shmoneh Esrei behind him, causing the seated person to be sitting in front of him, he should rise. So in front is a major issue, even if that person came later. But if it's to the side or behind him, if he was sitting there studying or whatever, doing whatever he's doing, and the other person came, then he does not have to stand up. The above applies only when one is praying at home. However, if one is praying at a place set aside for communal prayer, how much more so in a synagogue which is set aside for anyone to pray, even if one had been sitting previously and a colleague began to recite the Shmona Esrei. One must rise before him, since the place is designated for prayer. He says that the Mishnah Berurah says that if someone studied Torah, you don't have to stand up. Makes sense so far? Is it clear? Huh? Yeah. Number 21. It is forbidden to pass within 4 cubits of a person reciting the Shmona Esrei. If someone is praying and I need to go, somebody calls me, we're not allowed to cross in front of them within 4 cubits. 4 cubits is about 6 feet.
On the side you can.
On the side, yeah. Therefore, when one has already completed the Shmona Esrei, and there is another colleague reciting the Shmona Esrei behind them who has not yet completed his prayer, the former should not step backward 3 steps until the latter completes his prayer. Otherwise, he will be considered as one who passes in front of someone praying. So when you go back the 3 steps, please make sure that someone behind you already done praying. Otherwise, it is unacceptable. Now, I have to say that here we have the pews that are breaking between the people, so it's a different story. You understand, Harry?
No,
we have pews. A pew is separate. Every pew separates and creates a new domain. So even if behind me is in the next pew, someone has not completed prayer, I can go back 3 steps. Otherwise, if we're praying in a large room, like done in 770 or in large places, according to Jewish law, we have to be careful when stepping back, that we're not stepping back into the domain of someone else who is still in the middle of prayer.
So for example, if you're sitting,
if I'm sitting, someone behind me is praying, I have to stand up or move to the side.
But
unless there is a pew, if there is a pew.
If you're sitting and davening here, and let's say the other person is ahead of you and you're not there to stand up, you don't have to stand up.
Assuming there is a pew separated. Okay. 22. A person who is so intoxicated that he would not be able to speak before a great and important person is forbidden to pray. If he transgressed, in those days they didn't have the test that the police would make you walk on a line, so they came up with this one. If he transgressed and did pray, his prayer is considered an abomination, and he must pray again when he becomes sober. If the time for the Shmona Esrei passes, by the time he's sober, it's going to be next morning, and he's missing evening service, or in the morning, it's going to be intoxicated, he's going to be sober at night, he may compensate in the following prayer service. As described in chapter 21, with regard to a person who inadvertently or because of forces behind his control did not pray. As we'll discover, you can say Shmona Esrei a second time after you say the first one. But there is no allowance for someone who is intoxicated to pray. Let's do a few more. Chapter 19. The laws pertaining to the additions Mashiv Aruch to Morid Etal Umatar and Ya'aleh V'Yavor. These are prayers we add in the winter, like now we say Mashiv Aruch Morid HaGeshem, we say V'Ten Tal Umatar, and we also say Ya'aleh V'Yavor on Rosh Chodesh and holidays. In the winter, in the second blessing of Shmona Esrei, we recite Mashiv Aruch Morid HaGeshem, praising God who causes the wind to blow and the rain to fall. We begin making this addition during the Musaf service of Shmini Atzeret. Before the congregation recites the Shmona Esrei, the sexton announces Mashiv Aruch U'Morid HaGeshem. If he does not make this announcement, this phrase is not recited by the congregation when they recite Musaf. So first, the sexton must announce Mashiv Aruch U'Morid HaGeshem before Musaf and Shmini Atzeret, which is the last day of Sukkot. If he forgot to announce it, then we're not allowed to say Mashiv Aruch, because we need to have a public announcement first. On that festival, a sick person who prays alone at home And similarly, those who live in a village where there is no minyan should wait to recite Musaf until the time when they are sure that Musaf has been recited in the cities. Then they should recite Musaf, including this phrase. If I stay at home, I had too much mashke, too much drink, or I live in a community where there is no minyan, the Musaf prayer of Shmini Atzeres must be recited a little bit later until the time had passed that I know for sure that in the larger community nearby they already said Musaf and they already added that. And that festival, Mashiva Ruach Umorid Geshem is recited until Musaf of the first day of holiday of Pesach. That is, the congregation and the Chazan recited when they recite the Shmoneh Esrei in a hushed tone. Afterward, when the Chazan repeats the Shmoneh Esrei aloud, he does not recite it. From then on, it is not recited. So as soon as the Musaf Amida of the first day of Pesach arrives, we say V'tein tal Morida tal, we stop Mashiva Ruach. Accordingly, someone who prays alone should pray early so that he will be able to recite Musaf before the Chazan has concluded reciting Mashiva Ruach in the cities, because someone who recites Musaf after the Chazan has ceased reciting it should not recite Mashiva Ruach. He says on the first day of Pesach, make sure you daven morning prayer early, that you know that the communities, large communities, did not start their davening Musaf. Because if they already are daven Musaf, they already started Morida Tal, and then you're not allowed to say Mashiva Ruach. There are places where in the summer, instead of reciting Mashiva Ruach or Morida Geshem, they recite Mashiva Ruach or Morida Tal, praising God for granting it us due. In these places, the sexton should make an announcement to this effect before Musaf on the first day of Pesach. Then the congregation makes this addition when praying in a hushed tone and cease reciting Morida Geshem. We say Morida Tal, and that's when we start at the Musaf for the first day. So again, we need the sexton to announce it so that everybody stops. Number 2, the following rules apply. Should a person err and omit Mashiva Ruach or Morida Geshem, if he remembers before he concludes the second blessing of the Shmoneh Esrei, that is Mechayeh HaMeitim, before Ata Kadosh, ending Mechayeh HaMeisim, he should recite it at the place where he remembered, and then continue. He say Morida Tal, and Mashiva Ruach or Morida Geshem, and continue Mechalkel Chaim. However, he should take care not to interrupt a concept. For example, were he to remember after he recited Umekayem Emunato, he fulfills his trust, he should continue and say Lishenei Afar, to those who sleep in the dust. Then he should say Mashiva Ruach U'Morida Geshem, and then continue the blessing Micha Mocha Bal Gvurot, etc. So again, if you in the middle of the phrase, in the middle of the sentence, don't say it. Finish the sentence and say it. Alternatively, should he desire, he may begin Mashiva Ruach U'Morida Geshem, Mechalkel Chaim, saying the entire blessing over again. He can decide to go back, as I mentioned, to Mechalkel Chaim. Should he fail to remember until he concludes the blessing Mechayeh HaMeisim, until the second blessing is concluded before Ata Kadosh, he is required to begin the entire Shmoneh Esrei from the beginning. It is not sufficient to begin from Ata Gibor, the beginning of the second blessing, since in this regard, that is, a person who concluded a blessing improperly, the first 3 blessings are considered as one, and it is necessary to begin at the start of the Shmoneh Esrei. In this rule, in these requirements, all first 3 blessings are considered as one. So if I have to go to the beginning, it's not the beginning of the second blessing, but the beginning of the Amidah. If one heard and omitted this phrase during the evening, morning, or Musaf service of the first day of Pesach, he need not repeat his prayer because it's just the beginning. Number 3, should we stop here or do one more? We'll do one more. The following rules apply. Should a person from the communities where it is customary to recite Mashiva Ruach U'Morida Tal in the summer recite that phrase in the winter as well? instead of Mashiv Aruch or Morid HaGeshem as required. If he did not remember until after he began reciting the concluding blessing, Baruch Atah Ad Hashem, he should continue Mechaya Mesim. He need not begin his prayer again because he omitted the mention of rain, since he did mention dew. However, if he does remember before he mentions God's name, he should recite Morid HaGeshem at the conclusion of a concept. So what the Rabbi is saying like that. If I have to say Mashiv Baruch Morid HaGeshem and I forgot, but instead I said Morid Atal, if I remember until the concluding of the blessing, then I have to say it then, and either I go back Mechalkel Chaim or I continue. If it's afterwards, you don't have to repeat because I already asked for dew, which is sufficient. If I ask for rain during the summer, then it required to start all over if I already mentioned God's name. And we start from the beginning of the prayer. Next week, or in 2 weeks, God willing, we'll talk about in Barech Aleinu, V'ten Talumata, what happens then. Thank you very much.